Hey guys, I know it's been a while since I did the last video there, and got more subscribers again, so that's kind of cool. Once again, nothing to review, but what I wanted to talk tonight about was my digital journey. I guess it would have started around 1986, 1987. It would have been Yes's Close to the Edge. It was the Barry Diamond master from, it was 1986. And I heard the CD version, Q107 in Toronto. They had every Sunday, or they still have it, a Psychedelic Sunday thing. And I can't remember if it was Andy Frost back in the day or not, but it might have been somebody else. Anyhow, so they would have like a 1 hour session of just CDs of, classic albums, and they would play like certain tracks, and I heard And You and I, and forget about all the audiophile bullshit and everything else. It was a night and day difference. I had the LP pressing from Canada, and it was a piece of shit. It was muddy as fuck, and it just sucked, right? And this thing, just brilliant, clear, and the cymbals, the kick drum attacks, the very tight bass, and it was just, so I bought the CD. I didn't even have a CD player to play it on. And then eventually I bought a Philips CD 150 on layaway. I was in high school. I wasn't making that much money, but enough to, put stuff on layaway back when you could. And that CD 150 with its 14-bit, 4 times oversampling, dual DACs and all that cool stuff, to me was the best thing since sliced bread. And I was still buying LPs back then, because LPs, again, even the shitty pressings we got up in Canada, they sounded amazing, better than the CD versions, until you got to like the last track of side 1 or the last track of side 2 or second to last track even, and everything would fall apart. Intergroup distortion would kick in. Surface noise is something it's always going to be there in LPs, whatever. You can disagree with me on that, but it doesn't matter. I would still buy LPs back then. But a lot of times I'd run into this problem where I'd buy the LP and be happier than a pig in shit until I got to the middle to the end of the grooves on the one side. That happened to me with Momentary Lapse of Reason. I bought the LP version first, and it was a distorted mess when you got closer to the inner grooves, so I wound up buying the CD. And the problem with CDs back then, I wouldn't say so much the mastering and a lot of that stuff, because back in the mid to late 80s, they were releasing everything in parallel, so I know it was John Lennon's the album Milk and Honey. That was a triple release on CD, cassette, and LP all at once. So was Dire Straits' Brothers in Arms, and many others back in the day. I think Genesis and Peter Gabriel and all that in '86, ELP and Steve Winwood, Finer Things and all that. So all these releases would come out, and I would buy them on LP because it was always cheaper, right? It was always like half the price. So same problem though every time. Peter Gabriel's solo album sounded like crap when you got to the inner grooves, sounded great on the outer grooves, but I always noticed that the LP back then of the Canadian pressings were muddy, whereas when you bought the CD, everything just opened up, clarity and everything else. So that was my journey in digital back in the late 80s to, I guess early 90s, and really up in Canada they just stopped making LPs after 1990. Like, you'd find the odd ones here or there, so I was basically just buying CDs and a lot of cassettes. When Dolby S finally came on the horizon in '94, and labels like Atlantic or Warner were doing the Dolby S releases, so were BMG. They were doing a bunch of Dolby S releases. I'd buy those things because, again, the cassettes were cheaper than the CDs. As far as the sound quality, which they said was the same I knew it was bullshit back then, but certain releases, again, I'd buy them on CD, and certain releases I'd buy them on Dolby S cassette, HX Pro, right? And so I continued that, and then I guess around 1995, there was a bit of a resurgence in, when it came to LPs, and I rode that train for a little bit. I bought all three Beatles anthologies. The first anthology was mint, right out of the plastic, right out of the wrapper. The second anthology, Strawberry Fields, skips at the beginning. The third anthology, I think it was Glass Onion. There's a skip. On some of the Let It Be tracks, there's some scratches. This is right out of the wrapper. So when I digitized those, of course, I cleaned them up. I zoomed in. A scratch always looks like a sine wave, so you can actually cut those out. I think I was using Nero back then to do my LP editing, and now I do it with Audacity, so same shit. So yeah, I bought those up. I bought up ELP Trilogy and Tarkus on 200 gram mobile fidelity vinyl. That blew my mind, beginning to end. Outer groove all the way to the inner groove, just perfect. So I bought those LPs up, and then my last LP I bought in '95 would have been Pink Floyd's Pulse, 4 LP box set. I had the cassette. Again, I didn't buy the CD because of that annoying flashing red LED that everybody seems to love, or change the batteries in just because they can. I didn't buy the CD version because it was missing One of These Days. And when you bought the cassette, you got One of These Days, and I was at the show in '94 in Toronto. Stayed sober for that one. Got high as fuck at the one in '87, but that's another story. But the first half an hour of the show was literally sound effects that swirled around Exhibition Stadium in Toronto. That was the opening act. And then the band came out and was just the three of them, right, with Guy Pratt, the bass player, and they did Astronomy Domine. And then the rest of the band came out, did everything else. That was the tour. They did Dark Side of the Moon in its entirety, and the usual parts of Wish You Were Here. So that was an awesome show. When I bought the LP, it took me, even though it was done in England, right? Listening to the LP, even listening to the cassette, brought me back to that night in Toronto. Okay, I just re-quoted the Tragically Hip, but whatever. So that was my digital journey as of then. It was more LPs and CDs, in conjunction with cassettes at the time. Then you fast forward to around 2004, and my rig really never really changed that much, right? I got more. was more into home theater at the time, and I still am, which is where I'm hoping to take the channel in the future, to do some more home theater stuff. Fast forward though, and I get this Pioneer DV-578A universal player. I still had my rock solid Denon AVR-1802 receiver with the 5.1 external ins, and buying that universal player, and it basically dumbed down the SACD layer to, I think it was 88.2 24-bit PCM out the RCA jacks. Even that, I was able to clearly hear the difference between the SACD and its super bitmapped CD counterpart, and sometimes it's really, really hard to hear it, but a lot of times you know it right away. And I always found that SACD had a more vinyl-like quality to it. Same thing in 2003. I bought the LP version of Dark Side of the Moon, 30th anniversary, and the SACD counterpart. I preferred the LP sound over the SACD, but the SACD, I loved the 5.1 mix, right? And there was all kinds of articles. You can probably look them up online with Alan Parsons and you know, all the other folks. Doug Sachs, I think, was involved in that. And so, yeah, I always loved LPs, but I never loved the care and the feeding. I mean, back in 2003, even 2007 later on, I digitized my LPs, and they just stayed in the rack the entire time. I had a dual CS 515 turntable. That thing collected dust, and then when I redid my vinyl rips to 9624 PCM and a little more aggressive noise reduction, a little more, looking back now, it was a little too much, but I played some of those vinyl rips to friends, and they couldn't tell the difference. You know, when I told them that was playback on a cheap dual turntable with the Grado Red cartridge, and my phono preamp was inside the Denon AVR, they were like, "What?" I said, "Yeah." You know, I've never, you know, believed in all that high dollar stuff. But then you look at what I've got now, and okay, you know, I just contradicted myself so many years later. So, yeah, that was my digital journey up until the mid 2000s, and now, looking at it now, I was not really heavily into the whole 2-channel, you know, soundstage, imaging, blah, blah, blah. I just liked good sound, you know. And now that I've heard other people's audiophile rigs, slowly got into it myself, you know, and I've done a lot of shit that I regret. And my wife hopefully doesn't see this, but yeah, I threw a little bit of money away. But who amongst us hasn't, right? At the end of the day, we're all paying our bills, we're all working, we all have roofs over our head, and you know, this stuff is secondary, but you know. So yeah, now I've got this fancy PS audio DAC and the tube preamp, and hopefully one day I'll have the Orchard audio amp built up, all 6 channels. Right now, currently, I'm running my 901s with the Class D 1000 watt amp, which is actually 500 watts at 8 ohms and 1000 at 4 ohms. And I'm actually kind of shocked. The tube preamp smoothens the rough edges out of the Class D wooden box that I built last year. And it's starting to make me rethink my rig again, and that's going to be a topic for another video that I'm going to shoot tonight. But anyhow, yeah, so you look at my rig now, and yeah, the PS audio DAC, the tube preamp, the Sony player, I2S, blah, blah, blah. You know, you've seen the videos. And am I content with what I've got? Not yet, but I think that has a lot to do with the speakers. And again, that's going to be a topic for the other video I'm going to shoot tonight. And basically, guys, that's it. Again, appreciate you guys watching. That was my little ramble on about my digital journey. You know, yeah, we have come a long way. That's why I got rid of all my vinyl 6 years ago. You know, I've got rid of my vinyl to make a music server, knowing that one day that music server will be hooked up to something like that. Anyhow, guys, have a good weekend, and like I said, see you in the next video, and thanks again for watching. Have a good one.